Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Paranormal Gateway ParaTalk. Happy Friday, and thank you for tuning in. We do have a very special guest joining us tonight. So tonight we have Mark Nesbitt joining us. First off, I want to apologize for last week. We did end up kind of last minute canceling our show last week. That was my fault, y'all. I do apologize. For those of you who do know us on a personal basis, you guys know I've been dealing with a hellacious infection in the inside of my mouth. And thanks to a series of antibiotics and lots of Tylenol extra strength and ibuprofen, I am feeling a lot better now. So I can talk again. So we do apologize for that again, but we are back and we do have a guest with us. So I'm going to go ahead and just give you guys a brief intro about Mark if you don't already know our guest. Mark was a National Park Service Ranger historian for 5 years at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, before starting his research and writing company. Living in Gettysburg has given him a unique insider perspective to which to write his popular Ghosts of Gettysburg series. He has authored over 20 books spanning several genres, including paranormal, history, and true crime. Mr. Nesbitt has seen on the History Channel, A&E, Discovery Channel, the Travel Channel, Unsolved Mysteries, regional television shows, and heard on Coast to Coast AM and regional radio. In 1994, he created the commercially successful Ghosts of Gettysburg Candlelight walking tours. So welcome, Mark, and thank you for
Mark,
joining
the show.
us.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Scott and Teresa.
Sure. Been looking forward to this for a while.
Yes, absolutely.
Not that long, actually. I asked you 2 weeks ago, and you said yes. So.
But it's been brewing. It's been brewing for a while.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And I think for us, because we're both from Pennsylvania and that area.
York, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I live closer than you, Scott. I got one up on you, buddy.
Oh, by 15 minutes.
Well, Gettysburg is, I grew up in Ohio, and from the time I can remember, I remember the name Gettysburg. It's ingrained in the American culture, and I think I was 7 or 8 years old when my parents and I first visited Gettysburg. It was kind of like a side trip for us. And it was I don't know what to call it, but it was a strange feeling that I had even as a 7-year-old when we got here and started driving the battlefield. My goodness, that was back when the visitor center was still in the old post office. They didn't have the big Yeah, and now even that's gone. They tore that down a few years ago because it just didn't fit, and they've been thinking about it for years. So Gettysburg, you don't necessarily have to be from Pennsylvania. I think just about everybody has heard the name and is at least vaguely familiar with what happened here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you know anything about American history, you've at least heard of Gettysburg.
Well, yeah, the funny part is we used to ask people, can you name two Civil War battlefields? And they'd say, well, Gettysburg. They'd say that first, and then say, Valley Forge, which is Revolutionary War, 75 years before. But the Gettysburg itself has obviously changed a lot since the battle. Thank goodness, because it was pretty much wrecked after the battle. Now, the Battle of Gettysburg, if you recall your history, took place on July first, second, and third, 1863. The Civil War lasted from 1861 to 1865. So Gettysburg landed right about in the middle of the American Civil War, and that it sort of makes sense too because it's called the watershed, the high water mark of the Confederacy, the closest the South came to winning the American Civil War, which of course is arguable, but at any rate, from that point on, it was kind of the high tide of the Confederacy was receding, and yet it still took 2 more years to finally end the really the most horrible war we've ever had.
Right.
So, is it true that you lived on the battlefield in a house?
Yeah, actually I'm in my office here in Gettysburg, and there were troops that were in our building. We think they were Georgia troops because those are the nearest troops to where we are right now. On the first day's battle, the Union got beat here. The North got beat, and their troops were driven through the town of Gettysburg to the hills south of Gettysburg, and the Confederates then occupied the town. So when people come into our office, visitors, tourists come into our office and they say, "Where's the battlefield?" The answer is obvious. You're standing on it right here, right now. It's troops were, in fact, one of the tours that we give, we started about 2 years ago. It's called the West Confederate Tour. And it actually takes you along the Confederate lines in Gettysburg. One of the main Confederate lines is just 2 blocks behind me here in Gettysburg. And so, not just Little Round Top or Devil's Den or Spangler Spring, those famous landmarks were involved, but the actual town of Gettysburg itself, which I always thought was interesting. They have plaques on many of the buildings that were here at the time of the battle, so you can actually, put your hand on a spot where probably some soldier laid his hand at one time or another. So we have about 200 of the buildings left in Gettysburg out of the original, I believe, 400. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, out of those 200 buildings, which one, or maybe which 3, are your favorite historically, and why?
Well, historically, some of the buildings, for example, there's the Wills House, which is right down on the center square of town, and on the second floor, that's where Abraham Lincoln stayed and completed the Gettysburg Address in November of 1863, just a few months after the battle. He dedicated the National Cemetery here, and he actually completed the Gettysburg Address on the second floor, and then slept there the night before he delivered the address. So that's one of the more historic buildings. The Dobbin House is the oldest building still standing in Gettysburg. Yeah, and it's a restaurant, a very famous restaurant now, but and a very fine restaurant. And so that's that's another favorite building. And I've maybe I'm prejudiced, but I really like our building here on the corner of Baltimore Street and Breckenridge Street, mainly because, well, we've owned it for 20 some years, and we've done numerous paranormal investigations in the building. So we have resident ghosts in there, and ghosts whose names we know, and ghosts who will pretty much talk to us whenever we address them, especially the mediums that we bring in. I get EVP. I think you're familiar with electronic voice phenomenon. We can get EVP over there. They're pretty cooperative most times. So I kind of like our place too. We've got a lot of good pictures from inside, and it's just a nice typical house that was in the town of Gettysburg at the time. So I'm kind of prejudiced, but I like that house too.
Do you get a lot of EVPs in your house?
Yeah, I got a lot because it's nice when you own an historic house, a Civil War house, because you can lock it down. In other words, you can in the wintertime, nobody comes in. And actually did an experiment one night. I was always wondering, do you need human interaction to get EVP? I didn't know, so I thought I'd do an experiment. So I took my recorder up there, my digital recorder, and in the back room, second floor, that seems to be the room that's most active. And so I put my recorder up there, and I announced the time, and I said I'll see you tomorrow, and I left it on voice activation. So it shouldn't have picked up anything, right? Any other house it wouldn't pick. I got 44 minutes of EVP on that recorder, and nobody was in that. Nobody was upstairs. Nobody, because I locked it down. So that's kind of interesting when you have your own house and you can experiment with it. And
Yeah.
yeah, so we've had a lot of fun over there doing paranormal experiments, and we've learned a lot of things too.
That's awesome. I'd love to live in a house
Awesome.
like that. I'm in a dingy little apartment right now, so. So
Now, have you had any paranormal experiences that attribute to anything in any of your books, or anything that has kind of steered you in the direction to why you started writing any of your books?
Well, actually, the start of, I think that's two questions there. The start of my books actually had their beginning when I was a park ranger. And of course, I was young. I was in my 20s, and they used to put the park rangers in the historic buildings out on the battlefield. That's where
oh,
we live. Yeah, I know they're beautiful and they're nice, kind of small, but we did it for security purposes, so that nobody could
Okay.
break into them. And I lived in 4 different houses, and almost every single one of them, I had um, an unexplainable experience. And the one that really affected me and really kind of led to starting to collect ghost stories about Gettysburg. I lived in the National Cemetery Lodge for several years. That is the big brick building right in the National Cemetery. So
Okay.
they lock the
oh,
gates at night and that type of thing. So, but it was strange because it was an afternoon. I remember I had just finished lunch and I was carrying my dishes out to the kitchen, and all of a sudden I heard the best thing I can describe it as is a baby crying or a child
oh,
crying, and
wow.
I froze. I stopped, and I'm like, "What the heck was that? I'm all alone here. The baby's in this building." I said, "It was at the I'm trying to explain what it is. Was that the pipes doing something? Was it no, 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 no? That was a baby crying." Well, what could I do? I just, I washed my dishes and I went on with my business. But then the next day or two, I was in the office there at the park and in the coffee room, and I just casually mentioned that. And one of my colleagues said, "No, wait, stop right there because you need to talk to the lady who lived there before you." So I did, and sure enough, she said that while she was living there, she heard babies crying in there probably 4 or 5 times. In fact, one time she was so convinced she heard a baby crying. Uh,
Uh-oh.
and,
Took you off, Mark. You kind of froze.
Yeah.
that um, I didn't to is
Uh-oh.
actually only doors
So take him out and riff in.
the hit.
Oh, he went out. Like he goes back
I was
in
going to
again.
say it might have got choppy enough that it cut him out. Let's see if he comes back in.
I think he's using this computer one. So we'll keep talking. So, yeah,
Debbie, I'd like to live
Mark
in a
Nesbitt.
cemetery, but I'm not quite right. Girl, I'll come with you.
Yeah,
I'm not quite right either.
we're welcome. I wish Mark come back in again. Well, we're going to be at ParaCon hopefully coming up, and Mark's supposed to be there, so he's trying to get back in again here. Hold on.
Good.
Hopefully he is. He ain't try yet. Uh-oh.
The not quite right people are like my kind of people. I mesh with those kind of people really well.
Oh, Mark.
Honestly, I'm surprised it's not like it's not my internet. Have you been getting some crazy weather over there in Ohio?
Yeah. Hmm.
Oh my God, the other day it was like 60-some degrees. The following day, we had freezing rain and sleet and snow. Oh, and I'm like, what is going on here?
Mm.
Calm down, Mother Nature, with your bipolar shit.
We just had rain 24 hours in a row.
Oh, yeah, the rain's been pretty bad here. Like downpour.
Come on, Mark. Oh, here he is.
Hey guys,
Hey, welcome back.
sorry about that.
Been there, done that. We've had it.
Got the backup computer now. Thanks. So I think I finished telling you the story about the orphanage that was possibly the reason I heard babies crying in the cemetery lodge, and that actually got my first.
So bad.
What's that?
You were cutting in and out so bad. Like the last thing that we had really heard very clearly was you talking about being told to go speak to a woman, and that's when you like were like, "Uh-oh, we think we lost him."
Okay, well, to finish that story, then I had mentioned that I'd heard a baby crying in the cemetery lodge, and at to my colleagues in the coffee room, and they said you need to talk to the last woman that lived there. So I found her, and I told her what actually had transpired there, and that I heard a baby crying, and she said she'd heard it too, at least half a dozen times. So what I realized is that was happening, and that just 2 doors down from the cemetery lodge was where the soldiers' orphanage was in Gettysburg. There was one established in Gettysburg after the battle and after the war for the orphans of all the soldiers. And the story about the orphanage was that there was a very cruel headmistress. The second one they had was very cruel and made the kids stand out in the cold, made the kids cry when they misbehaved. And so maybe that was the source of the crying that I and other people had heard in that building. So that, that's why I like the history about Gettysburg, because a lot of times it helps the ghost story make sense. There's a tie-in usually, the history and the ghost story.
Right.
Yeah, we have, yeah. Did you have any personal experiences besides? I want to ask you. I want to ask you about when you do your tours. Did anybody on your tours have any experiences?
Yeah, yeah, that's it. That's a good question because we I'll get letters from people who say, "Here's what happened to us on your tour," and they'll and it covers all the when I get people send me photographs from the tours. I got people telling me
Yeah.
stories about hearing things on the tours, footsteps walking behind the tour, and they turn around and they can't see anybody. There's no one behind them. So they have had experiences. A lot of people have taken photographs. There seems to be a kind of an active place on one of our tours that used to be a schoolhouse and then became a hospital for both Union and Confederate soldiers on on East High Street, and people have sent me photographs, and we're still trying to solve the mystery because almost every time somebody takes a tour past there, or every other time they'll take a picture, and somebody will be in the window looking out.
Oh,
And it's a public building now. It's a housing authority, so nobody's there after 5. You know, they close up at 5 o'clock. So it's very strange. We do have a lot of people experiencing things on our tours. I've experienced some things. Not I don't go on the tours, but when we do paranormal investigations, a lot of people don't realize it, but they think that seeing a ghost is the only way you're going to experience a ghost, and this is not true.
Mm.
Right. All the senses are involved, as I'm sure you know. Maybe the most, when you collect over 1,000 ghost stories, they start to form a database, and I can analyze them and start determining what percentage different types of experiences are. And from my stories, only about 10% of all these my stories are visuals, where people actually see a ghost. Probably 60%, 65% are auditory. You'll hear a ghost here at Gettysburg before you will actually see one. And but all the senses are involved. I've been tapped on the shoulder. I've had my sleeve pulled. One time out at the Daniel Lady Farm, which is a very active place. There was a group that was out there, and I was kind of being their host. And they were sitting down in a circle, and it was dark. And I looked up on the ridge to the west, and I saw somebody standing there, kind of silhouetted on the ridge. And it was very strange because I swore he wore red pants. And finally they finished what they were doing, and I asked them, do you have your whole group here? Is everybody here? And they were like, yeah, we're all here. I said, okay. And I said, I saw somebody on the ridge. And the interesting thing about the red pants is that ridge was an artillery position for the battery. And all the different divisions of the Army had different colors they were associated with. Infantry had light blue colors and light blue trim. The cavalry had yellow trim. And the artillery, which was up on that ridge, had red trim. And some of them even had red pants. So was it the ghost of an artilleryman that I saw up there? May very well be.
Could very well be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Hey, so
So I have a question for you, and I think this one kind of hits home for a lot of people, especially that are from the area. But what are your personal thoughts, opinions on? So we all know the stories of how people were supposedly being shot, and they actually ended up with what I guess back then they were made out of, what was it, cement, like some kind of cement, like bullets. And these projectiles were pulled out of people, which ended up supposedly leading to why the barrel was taken off of the end of the one soldier statue that is, what is that? That's when you're coming up in and through the one area. Is that down by Spangler Spring? No, that's not by Spangler. Is that Spangler Spring? You would probably know better than I would, Mark.
I think what you're talking about is there's one statue. It's a crouching soldier.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's actually on the other side. It's in a place called the Loop, and
yeah, that's
the barrel. The barrel is missing from that weapon. Now, the story I always heard is that it wasn't that it was broken off or anything, but that it was they just didn't have enough granite when they were carving it to complete the statue. Yeah, that's kind of funny, kind of strange.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
But, that's what I always heard. But the other interesting thing about that statue is that's the one, as you're coming, if it's dark and you're coming around the corner, your lights hit that statue. And as they keep moving, it appears that he turns around to look at you. So that really, and it really does look like he's, because of the shadows and everything, like he's starting to turn around and look at you.
There's another one. There's another one that's like that too. It's one of the ones. Oh, he's on a horse. I believe he's on a horse. I can't remember where he's at though. Oh, it's been
well,
so
we
long.
narrowed it down because there are only there are not that many equestrian statues out there. There are two on East Cemetery Hill. Hancock and Howard are both up there. Are they supposed to move or something? Is that what you're saying, Teresa?
Yeah, where they're supposed to move. And I want to say he doesn't sit too far off the road. Because I can remember doing this when I was like 18, 19 years old. I'm like, oh, I want to see this soldier on the horse move. Like a show. I didn't see him move. Just so we, make that clear. I didn't see him move.
That's
but
a
the
new
four
one.
other people in the vehicle were like, he moved. I'm like, I didn't see him move. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know about that.
But it's funny that there's a lot of those stories that circulate about, the monuments and the statues that, they move, or they've been altered in one way, or the else has happened, or this has happened, but there's apparently a lot of those stories where, these projectiles have supposedly been removed from people.
Yeah.
Like,
well, they do still find bullets out on the battlefield. I mean, if you have all these, soldiers, you had almost 200,000, 75,000 Union or Confederate, 97,000 Union soldiers, and they're all firing their weapons, and tons and tons and tons of ammunition was expended here. And that is why metal detecting is illegal out on the park, because
people bringing that up
if they go to the field,
people,
that'd be rude.
I'm sorry?
That'd be rude digging up the field.
Well, yeah, that's the problem.
The thing is people do it and they just don't give a what. Like, they don't care.
And so you can't have that. So it's illegal. And but they're still, and it's kind of neat to think that stuff from the battle is still there, still under your feet as you're walking the field.
Absolutely. It still gives you a sense of that, I guess, nostalgia of what of what used to be. You know, so many people just walk through our modern times and don't really stop to think about what used to be, you know?
Right.
I think
Well,
maybe if more people did that, you would appreciate what you have, what life is like now, maybe just a little bit more.
Well, that's one of the reasons why we use the ghost stories. That our tours are a little bit different from others, because what we do is we have our guides tell the history of the site first, where they are,
Yeah,
and
like that.
what happened at that site. Then they'll tell the ghost story associated with it, and that is important for a couple reasons. Number one, it adds validity to the ghost story. In other words, you can see that there are, like I told you about the guy in the red pants.
Right.
It's an artillerist. That was their color. And if you tell the history about it first, it helps people. It adds validity to the story, but it also helps people to remember the story. You know, you
Absolutely.
have probably one of the few ghosts that we have actually identified here is the ghost of General Reynolds. Now, General Reynolds was the highest ranking Union officer to die here at Gettysburg. And it was just, he brought his troops to the battlefield. He saw them engaged, and he was probably 15 minutes, 20 minutes after he got to the battlefield, was shot in the back of the neck and killed. He was a major general here. And his ghost has been seen a couple of times by individuals. He was shot and killed near the Lutheran seminary. And I got a call from a seminarian who said that he had a very strange occurrence in his room, and it coincided with something else that happened in his dormitory that night. He said he was sound asleep about 11 o'clock at night, and he heard this wild scream come from the down the hall. And he recognized the voice, and he thought it was his buddy, and he thought maybe his buddy was just, reenacting one of his military screams because he was in the service, and so he didn't think much of it, so he fell back asleep. And about 1 o'clock in the morning, he was awakened by an absolute chill in his room, and he got up, he opened his eyes, he partially sat up. And there, according to him, floating in the room with him was a disembodied head, just floating. And
Oh, wow.
he looked at it, and I said, "What did it look like?" He said, "Well, he was kind of dark complected. He had big full beard, and he said I saw part of his shoulders, and he had like shoulder straps on, like he was a military man." And he apparently tried to yell at the guy. He wasn't sure what was going on, whether he was dreaming, and he did it 3 or 4 times, and finally he started to stand up to confront this individual, and the individual disappeared from his room. So the next day, he's walking down the road on campus, and he sees his friend that he heard scream in the middle of the night, and he went over to me. He says, "Hey, I heard you yell last night. Will we practice some of your Army yells?" And the guy got real serious, and he said, "No, I was in my room asleep. I woke up, and there was a guy standing there, a soldier from the Civil War." And he said he had a dark beard and a dark face, and he had dark blue coat. In other words, the same ghost went from one room at 11 o'clock that night down the hall into the other room, and to scare another student. So, and later on, I took a series of photographs of generals. And, when you look at them, they all kind of look alike. They all have a beard, and a mustache, and they all have the uniform on. And I showed him pictures of generals, and he said, that's him. That's the general I saw. And it was John Reynolds.
Wow.
So, and he's been seen other places too, in particular in the place called the George House That was the guy's first and last name. And I have several witnesses from years and years and years ago that actually saw Reynolds on a cot in that house where he was taken after he was shot, and a woman sitting there in mourning next to him.
Wow.
And they saw him, and in fact, they went in the next day to talk to the people who were running the place, and they said, I think we saw. They said, first of all, they said, where are the mannequins? And the people said, what mannequins? And they said, well, we saw a general lying out here on the floor and a woman sitting next to him. And they were like, we don't have any mannequins in here. And they said, well, I know we saw it. He said, because right back there, and he pointed to a display that was up against the wall. He said, right back there was a door. And the two women that were in the shop were like, we've got a problem here, because there was a door to the original house back there behind all this shelving and all this equipment things that they had hanging up there. So they apparently did get a view into the past to see Reynolds lying there before he was taken back to his home in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and buried there. So once again, that's, the history kind of helps us understand who the ghost might be, or why at least the ghost is appearing in those places.
Right. Yeah. So one of our viewers asked, Debbie asked, she said, don't you think all the battle recreation has an effect on the spirits in that area? Good question. Who wants to go ahead and answer that first?
That's an excellent. That's an excellent question. Oh, did you want to answer it? Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're our guest. Go for it.
That's a really good question, because I have in the 1980s, I believe, or early 90s, they made that movie Gettysburg. I think you remember that, and they filmed a lot of it here. Some of it on the battlefield, but they did have an encampment, and they had guys, reenactors, encamped out there living just like a Civil War soldier would for a couple of months. And I got a fellow from California wrote to me and sent me 13 pages of just notes of things that happened while they were in that encampment. Some of the things, and I think that it says something about the ghosts. The ghosts, maybe just like we can occasionally see them, maybe they can see us from their perspective. And of course, if you're the ghost of a Civil War soldier, and you see a bunch of guys dressed like you are, and you smell the coffee and you smell the bacon. That's a pretty strong enticement to go over and be with these fellas.
Absolutely.
And they saw people, in fact, even their horses, they saw them ride horses into the camp and then, disappear. So that's a good question. And I think that you do have a lot more activity within the encampments like that.
And I do believe maybe it wasn't the Gettysburg movie. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. But if my memory serves me correctly here, I do think there was kind of like an off click of that movie that was made that kind of did go in stories about encounters that did happen while filming that movie.
I didn't hear your.
It was from like the actors and the actresses' perspectives of some of the stuff that they did encounter. I'm going to have to look into it. I thought it was the Gettysburg movie, but I could be wrong. I might be thinking of like a different movie. I thought it was Gettysburg, but I only
heard part of your part of your answer there, but I know that they, like I said, I got 13 pages of just notes, not a full stories, but just notes. So there probably had to be in that 13 pages, probably 50 encounters that they had during that time period. Yeah.
And Betty, to kind of, also go into that a little bit too. As investigators, we also know we have what we call residuals, and we have intelligent, spirit, ghost, whatever you want to call them. Certain people refer to them in a different content. So, residual spirits, they just kind of, they roam around, they do their thing. They're not aware of us. They more so go about doing their thing in what they did before they passed. The intelligent ones, they are the ones who are really the ones who are, they're making contact. They're the ones who are wanting to reach out to make contact with the living. I would think in a scenario like that, you are dealing with a huge range spectrum of a little bit of everything. You've got the residual and you've got the intelligent that are just all over the place. I mean, I think it would definitely spike the activity.
Yeah, well, yeah, and we have both of those types predominantly here in Gettysburg. And some of the examples, for example, the Phantom Regiment or Battalion, a Phantom Battalion has been seen. I probably have 5 or 6 different accounts of this unit of soldiers that is seen marching around. People think that they are reenactors. They march off into the woods, and people go to try and find them, and there are no buses, there are no cars, and there are no people. And one of those that I think is really interesting is a couple had just gotten onto the battlefield. It was early in the morning, and they were at the peach orchard, and they just driven over the hill, and they looked down into the field, and they saw a unit of soldiers marching around and maneuvering like they were practicing for a reenactment. Now, the interesting part is they had the family dog with them, and the dog was in the back seat, and the dog was growling. The dog saw it too. The interesting part about that is when humans witness something like that, we have a tendency to make up excuses. I can't be seeing that. Did I really see that? That I was something under my contact. We had a little too much to drink last night. We have all kinds of excuses. But animals, the dog, they don't have that baggage. They just alert. And that's exactly what this dog did. So that means to me that vision was there. Okay. Yeah. Nobody was hallucinating. The dog saw it. And when they said when a couple of joggers came over the hill, the entire unit just vanished, just disappeared before their eyes. And the dog quit growling and went back to sleep. So that's and we have many examples of the residual, and that's a perfect example of residual because it's seen so many times, and there is virtually no interaction. And one of the very first stories that I heard as a park ranger here was an interactive ghost. And once again, it was early in the morning, and a young lady came into the national park, and she said, "I have a question." She said, "Are there any ghosts here at Gettysburg?" And we were told
no.
We were told to say no because the bosses didn't want to get involved in that kind of stuff. So we said no, and then we looked around to see if there were any bosses, and we said, why? What happened? And she said, well, I was at a Devil's Den early this morning, and it was a beautiful morning. It kind of got turned around a little bit. I wasn't sure where I was. So I parked the car and I got out and I went up on the highest rock up there. And I was looking around. I figured I was going to take a photograph of such a pretty morning. She said, I had my eye to the camera, and all of a sudden I got, this weird feeling that I wasn't alone, that someone was looking at me. And she said, so I turned around and there was this guy standing there, and there were no other cars. I didn't, and he said, he looked at me, he said, what you're looking for is over there. And he pointed. And she said, I turned around and I'm like, how does he know what I'm looking for? And she said, I turned right back and he disappeared. He was gone. And we asked her, well, what did he look like? And she said, well, he kind of looked like a hippie. He had a floppy hat, shoulder length hair. He was ragged clothes on, barefoot. His pants were like, all ragged at the bottom. And what she didn't realize is that she described one of the Texas troops. They're kind of proud of the fact that they were the raggediest looking guys in Lee's army. And the other interesting part about it is that it was the Texans that actually took Devil's Den away from the Union soldiers on the second day of the battle. So she just literally unknowingly described the type of soldier that was there at the time of the battle, and also had what we all call an intelligent haunting or an interactive haunting. So
Right.
I think that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of claims. I mean, Gettysburg was one of the places for me in the beginning of becoming a very well seasoned paranormal investigator. That's where I went. That's where I went to not only practice with devices and equipment, but to hone in on my own senses. And Sachs Bridge was, for me personally, Sachs Bridge was one of my personal favorite locations to go, because for me, now this is just me personally, but there were a few very intelligent spirits there that loved to communicate. And if you were nice to them, they would be very nice to you. And they love to communicate. They absolutely love to communicate. I think it's very cool when somebody can have an experience like that and not be scared of it. She
Right.
didn't seem, it kind of, it's kind of like a what just happened here kind of moment for her, but she didn't seem to be scared by it in any way. So that was a really cool experience for her, that she could experience something like that.
Well, Sachs Bridge is a fascinating area. That was the bridge was used by both Union and Confederate, and probably 90% of the bridge is original, and it was used by both armies during the battle. Excuse me. It became a Confederate hospital site then behind once the lines were established, and so thousands of Confederate soldiers were worked on there. Lots of amputations, because that's all they knew how to do back then if you were shot in the arm or the leg, and burials out there, and burials of arms and legs. Now they usually exhumed the bodies eventually, but the arms and legs they didn't. So there are probably lots of human bones still out there. And the other interesting thing is that there's the largest flowing body of flowing water in the area. Marsh Creek runs right under that bridge. Right. And one of the theories is that, energy, that ghosts need some kind of energy to interact with us or appear or whatever. And the theory is that water has so much energy in it. I mean, it's 1,300 pounds cubic yard. So, and that's moving, and that's a lot of energy to draw from. That may be why Sachs Bridge has quite a bit of activity out at it. Unfortunately, it has kind of been overrun by some of the tours take people out there. They're really not supposed to, but some of them take out there, and it's getting really crowded anymore. So you can't really get EVP because too many people are laughing.
Noise pollution.
Yeah,
they're asking, to light their cigarette and stuff, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Hey, Mark, I got a question for you. You talk about amputation being done in houses and stuff. Is it true that they take the amputated part or limb and toss out the window?
Yeah, Scott. They, in fact, that was the easiest way to get rid of the limbs, and there were so many of them that one of the houses that I lived in, the Hummelball house, I read about it. It became a hospital after the battle, and I'm glad I didn't know this until after I left, because a surgeon was walking towards the house at night, one of the nights of the battle, and they were amputating there, and he said from a distance, he saw underneath the windows these strange pyramids, and they reached up to the windowsill underneath the window, and he said I couldn't figure out what they were until I got closer, held up a lantern, and they were pyramids of arms and hands and legs and feet piled up to the height of the windowsill. So when you think about the worst horror film you've ever seen, you can make that about 10 times worse, 100 times worse at Gettysburg right after the battle. And literally for months after the battle, there were, of those 97,000 Union soldiers and 75,000 Confederates, 51,000 became casualties. That's killed, wounded, and missing. That's Yankee Stadium. That's what Yankee Stadium holds, 51 or 52,000. All those people dropped down on a little town of about 400 buildings plus the farms and everything, and about 2,400 people. That's all Gettysburg was in 1863. So it was a pretty horrible place. So they didn't get all the bodies buried right away, so they were out in the hot sun in July for several. That's why one of the things that people talk about in terms of a ghostly experience is they'll smell lilac water or rose water wafting through the air, and they're like, I haven't smelled that since my grandmother was wearing it when she was alive. And what we think it's coming from is that the women in Gettysburg, when the bodies were decomposing out there, they would be walking along, and all of a sudden the wind would shift and the smell would come in of decomp, and they always kept a hanky in their pocket soaked in rose water or lilac water, and they'd immediately put it up to their face so they wouldn't have to smell this horrible smell. And people to this day smell that, and it's probably something ghostly that they're smelling. So that's another experience. Another experience on our tour. Yeah, people have had that experience. The other thing they smell is rotten eggs, and they can't figure that out. But it's pretty simple. One of the main components of black powder, the propellant that they used was sulfur. And so that's what they're smelling. Well, if you go to an encampment after they've had a battle, you'll that's what you'll smell. It just permeates their uniforms. So you can smell it all the time.
Wow.
I think one of the cool things too about Gettysburg is I mean, and I heard it, especially late at night. You know, sometimes it's hard to hear during the day because of the hustle and bustle and everything. But is the phantom sound, and a lot of people don't talk about that. But like, you know, the gunshot, the cannons, you know, during the day, yeah, obviously it's very hard to hear that because of the hustle and bustle and everything. But at night, when the town kind of goes to sleep and you don't hear as many vehicles and traffic, and you know, you can hear it. You can definitely hear it.
I have accounts of people. No, the only thing I ever heard out there was a drum being.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I heard. But the interesting part is I heard 4 taps of a drum, and then it stopped. And now I used to be a drummer, so no drummer I ever knew could stop at just 4 taps. You know, you play around a little bit longer, but 4 taps, and that's all I heard. But people have heard cheers, bodies of soldiers, large bodies of people cheering, and that was very common during the battle. And they've also heard cannons going off, and volleys of gunfire, not just 1 or 2 shots, but volleys. People have talked about hearing bullets whizzing past their ears when they're in places like the triangular. So yeah, people have heard a lot of things out there on the battlefield when it's fairly quiet.
Yeah, the screams. I know the screams, the yells, and stuff like that. People have heard that, especially when it's quiet. Speaking of the triangle, I don't know if either one of you have seen. Have either one of you seen the video of? I don't know. I don't think it was an investigation team, but it is of a bunch of soldiers who just kind of come out of one tree line.
I saw it.
And then go right in. Okay, so you guys have seen that video?
I know which one you're talking about.
That's one of my favorite videos. I absolutely love that video.
That's interesting because I know there is a path down there. It's the Boy Scout trail. And at first I thought maybe it was just Boy Scouts that they caught on that film, but the Boy Scout trail goes the other way. You know, they're actually coming from the right to the left, but the Boy Scout, if you were a Boy Scout on that trail, you're actually moving the other direction. So I don't think it was Boy Scouts, and they didn't look like kids. You know, they look like men. So the jury's still out on that one. I try and debunk it first, but then when I came,
and I couldn't figure it out. So
I'm like, it's pretty compelling. It's pretty compelling.
Yeah, nowadays it's hard to tell what people are faking stuff, and it makes it harder for everybody else. There's so many editing tools out there now where you can just throw this stuff into your pictures and your videos, and which stinks. You know, it does definitely make it a lot harder. You know, unless you can put it onto your computer and your software and see if it is legit or if it has been something that has been pieced together. You know, I can do tell.
To just view it, it's so hard. It's so hard to be able to tell.
Yeah, you have to be careful anymore. I know that there were, when it first came out, there was this app where you could put a Civil War soldier right in your photograph. And one of my guides saw it, and they came running in and they said, "Look at this." And I was looking at it, and it was a perfect Civil War soldier. And I'm like, if it looks too good to be true, you know, it's probably not true. Because any ghost photographs that I have seen have been, you know, a little hazy, a little out of focus, and that type of thing. So
it's just half of one or part of one. Yeah.
Right.
So do you have any personal favorite experiences from Gettysburg?
Probably not. I see we only have about a minute or two left. Is that right?
We
do
go
we
a
have-
little bit if I have to.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Oh, well, yeah, I have a lot of things that have happened to me at Gettysburg, but I've been around here forever, so that helps.
I
But
tell you on again.
yeah, I
I
think one of the
coming.
one of the interesting things that well, I already told you about the cemetery lodge. I was doing a paranormal investigation at the famous Cashtown Inn, and
I love that.
Mhm.
yeah, and I had we were working with a medium, Patty Wilson, who's great. She said, there's a Confederate soldier down here in the basement. And I said, do you have a name? And she said, his name is Andrew. So I said, on my recorder, I said, Andrew, what state are you from? And of course, you can't hear anything when you're getting EVP, but when I played it back, I got 4 distinct syllables. Mississippi. He told, it was that clear. He told me that he was from Mississippi.
Wow.
So that was one of the exciting experiences. I don't have any scary experiences to me because, I'm so familiar with the battlefield, and I used to do patrol work out there and lived out there, that it's like an old friend. But unexplainable things, yes, things I can't explain. But you guys know what it's like when you're doing a paranormal investigation and it's dark and you hear a door slam. We all go running towards it. Everybody runs away. Everybody with any brains runs away. We run towards it. But I just before we go, I just wanted to mention that if anybody wants to find out about anything, we have. They can go to our website, which is ghostsofgettysburg.com. I think it's been going on the crawl down in the bottom there. Ghostsofgettysburg.com. We'll be starting our tours on Saturdays, starting April 10th. So if anybody wants to look that up, they can go there. Plus, we have
I highly recommend them.
We have an app out now that you can download on your phone. Cool. Yeah, and you can either take it. It takes you on a tour, a ghost tour of the battlefield itself, of the park. And if you want to go on that, you can do that. But it's got some really good pictures on it too. You can take a tour of a ghost tour of Gettysburg from your office if you want.
That is so cool.
Hey,
Mark, so cool.
Are we gonna be seeing you next month at the Parapsychon?
Probably not. I think that's on a date that I'm. When is that?
It's May 23rd, I think. 22nd and 23rd, May.
Yeah. No, I'll probably be busy here at that.
Cause I think you're scheduled as a speaker.
Now, which one is it? Which one? Who's running this one?
It's the one in Ohio, the formatory.
Yeah.
Oh, that one. Yes, that's why.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know which one you're talking about. That's why I'm busy. I'm going to be there.
Yeah, I'll be there too. Hey,
great.
There's one 2 years ago. You were at that one. I met you there.
Okay. All right.
I got a picture tape with you.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm going to try and get my talk. It's going to be on hidden haunted hotspots of Gettysburg.
All right.
Awesome.
Places nobody goes. So.
Yeah. Cool. I'm looking forward to it.
Before we let you go, is there anything else that you'd like to put out to the viewers as far as like maybe, social media, contact info or anything like that where they can find you?
No, you guys have been doing it for me. Ghostsofgettysburg.com on that crawl the whole time. And we're looking forward to a really good season this year. And I'll probably be autographing my books just about every Saturday in the evening between around 8 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the evening. So people can check for that too. So
yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
I'll get one at Paracon.
Okay. That sounds good. That sounds good. Well, thanks for
We
having me.
let you,
No,
we
he was-
let
he
you
was
go this
awesome.
evening, Mark,
Awesome.
and we will definitely have to have you back for a part 2. That way you can
Uh,
share a lot more of your experiences with us and maybe tell us about your experience at the Paracon as well. So,
Okay.
but it was a pleasure
That's
having
good.
you, and thank you for joining us this evening.
My pleasure. Have a good evening.
too.
Thank you. You as well,
thanks, Mark.
sir.
Have a good evening.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.